did Facebook go too far or not far enough?
Well, you might be surprised to hear me saying this because I've been very critical of Facebook in recent years, but I think they kind of went just to the right place in this instance. Uh, the proof will be in the pudding as to how they actually implement what they said they're doing today. But I was very impressed that they seem to have taken some very rational steps. Um, it wasn't just extending the ban on Trump, it was really implementing a whole new set of guidelines for how they treat politicians and how they treat the notion of newsworthiness when it comes to politicians globally. And they made some big changes.
So let's talk a little bit about the reaction. Of course, there's the reaction from Trump himself saying Facebook's decision is an insult to the record-setting 75 million people, plus many others, who voted for us. They shouldn't be allowed to get away with this censoring and silencing and ultimately will win. Our country can't take this abuse anymore. To be clear, it was just over 74 million votes. And then you have Facebook itself saying almost that it doesn't want to have this power, David. A lengthy statement from Facebook, this coming from Nick Clegg, him saying, we think that giving private companies the power as a commercial entity to sort of permanently banish someone from significant parts of online discourse is a very significant step. And at the end, American democracy doesn't belong to Silicon Valley. It belongs to the American people. It's legislators and politicians of this country who, in the end, have to govern the rules that prevail. What do you make of that?
Well, I think Facebook's right in theory. If government could really come up with a rational set of rules of the road for digital speech, it would be great. I'm skeptical that that would be easy to do, particularly in our current political environment. And the reality is, everyone needs to remember that commercial companies have the right to do whatever they want with their products. They don't have any obligations to host anything because somebody, even if it's the president or ex-president, wants them to. So Facebook is completely within their rights to do absolutely anything that they want. Now, I think separately, there has been a very serious question about the way they implemented that control over recent years. I think they have frankly capitulated to many politicians, including President Trump while he was in office, and in many other countries around the world in similar instances. So what I'm especially impressed by is that in responding to their Oversight Board, which is what they did today, they basically took almost every one of the Oversight Board's recommendations and made a serious attempt to implement them to come up with a more standardized, transparent, and fair set of guidelines for how they treat political speech by public figures.
So let's talk about the Oversight Board, because some folks think it shouldn't have ever gotten to the Oversight Board at all. I asked Natasha Lamb, an activist investor in Facebook, about this earlier today, right after this news about the suspension crossed. Take a listen to what she had to say.
Board should not have to be dealing with these kinds of issues. It's very much the symptoms, not the sickness, why we're getting, the garbage at the end of the pipe versus why is the business model of Facebook been so damaging.
She's saying the Oversight Board shouldn't be dealing with these issues at all. Would you agree?
Well, in some sense, I would agree. I think there's been a failure of nerve, maybe a failure of bravery, and of even conviction and honor, even on the part of Zuckerberg and his company, in not having taken actions like this on their own a long time ago. It's kind of a brilliant stroke creating this board and then letting them make a decision, but then actually taking their advice and doing something that they might have had a hard time justifying if they had said it was just their own decision to do so. So in a way, they can sort of blame the Oversight Board for taking actions that are very difficult to take, particularly banning the ex-president for 2 solid years. It gives them a little bit of kind of air from the decision and say, hey, it's not us, it's the board. We're just taking their advice, trying to do what they recommended. That they didn't say specifically to ban him for 2 years, but they said that he should be banned, and Facebook had to decide what their rules were because they weren't implementing their rules in a consistent manner regarding the president up to now. The issue of the business model, which she refers to, it's a whole different question. that Facebook's business model does have a lot of pernicious effects in terms of incenting the company to basically allow anything to stay up that will keep eyeballs on the service. And that's something that many
Right.
people criticize them for, but that's a really matter for another day here.
So, quick question, David. We've only got about 30 seconds left, but you've covered Mark Zuckerberg from the earliest days. And I'm curious how much you think this decision was Mark Zuckerberg himself, how much he was influenced by Nick Clegg, or public opinion in terms of getting to this point.
Well, Zuckerberg said in 2019 he believed politicians should be able to do anything on Facebook. So this is a 180 for him. I think Nick Clegg was the player that really led to all of these changes, and that by his idea of setting up this oversight board and doing it very effectively, and then I'm sure he's the one that convinced Zuckerberg to basically accept their recommendations. I don't think Zuckerberg wanted to do this. I think he's probably very nervous about the implications it's going to have in many countries, not just the United States, if they really do have to come down harder on political leaders. But he has changed. He has very much changed.